Hello, libertarians, Marxists, and all of you in the middle. Welcome to the final episode of Murray Rothbard for a New Liberty on the Book Boys podcast.
Hello.
Hello, Nick. What a wonderful morning voice you have. Where did we leave off last time?
Thank you.
We went until chapter 9. And
Yep. So this is the fourth episode of our discussion of For a New Liberty. The first episode we ran through the introduction and went through kind of the essential libertarian creed, chapters 1 to 3. The second episode we started diving into the how libertarianism can be applied to specific problems. So we talked about like taxation, we talked about involuntary servitude, personal liberty, education, and welfare. And the third episode we devoted entirely to talking about inflation and the business cycle. So we had a lot to talk about with like Keynes and his legacy. So this final episode will be dealing with the last 5 chapters of the book. I guess slightly abbreviated, but it's at this point, like I think we already have quite a reasonable grasp on the ideas behind and the thinking behind libertarianism, and at this point I think a lot of it is just sort of explaining how that
application
works in relation to things like so we have government and business, we have a specific chapter on streets and roads which hopefully will end the debate for good. We have a very interesting chapter on like policing and the courts, and then things that are, I think, even more relevant today, like talking about conservation and ecology.
Yep.
And
foreign policy.
Then finally, foreign policy and war, before we end with kind of like a closing note from Rothbard about the future of libertarianism.
Rightio. So we're just going to go a bit chaotic, I think, and talk about whatever I think, left us with the most impression. When I read the book the first time, like 3-ish years ago, I mean, the road chapter was very cool, of course, because as we have mentioned many times on the show, there's always this inside joke almost about libertarians that if you talk to a non-libertarian about, getting government out of everything, one of the first things that always comes up is, but who's gonna build the roads? And the libertarian take is, of course, well, roads were here before government. First of all, government did not invent roads. Private people were building roads before that, merchants making trade routes, etc. And it's kind of like a copy paste of most other like public services that are provided by government. Like having private roads isn't like a significantly different situation than having private post offices. But there are some things Rothbard mentions in this chapter. Do you want to start with that?
Yeah, for sure. I think the roads question is like very interesting. And I think if you can kind of get over this, you can probably get over anything if it comes to like libertarianism.
Yeah.
It's kind of, he brings again this example of like the publicly produced shoe situation in which all shoes are provided by the state, and how ludicrous it would be if suddenly, how ludicrous it would be for this public shoe company to turn private. Obviously, there's no national discourse anywhere in the world about access to shoes, really. And it's definitely not seen as a problem that the government need to solve. So why, in the case of roads, do we think completely different? And so I think, there are a couple points that he talks about. Firstly, like you kind of already mentioned, roads have always existed. The idea of allowing people on your property to pass through a certain way is not like a particularly new idea. And within the whole dynamic of like, people have a need to go somewhere, as they have a demand to go somewhere, and there's someone that can facilitate that way, that's something that there's value in that. And if there's value in it, then it can be applied within a market. He also talks about how... Sorry, go on.
The kind of first... Well, one of the main things you will always hear in a discussion between a libertarian and a non-libertarian on this road topic is, but if we privatize roads, wouldn't businesses be able to just wall everyone off and just make you basically be trapped on your property forever, because you can't access the road anymore? So yeah, what's the libertarian response to that?
So so you're giving an example of you have your house, you have a property line, you have a little path that goes to the edge of the property line and then onto a private street, which is owned by another company, we assume. And then the criticism then is okay, so if this company owns the road outside your house, what's stopping them from blocking your access to the road? And the truth is that there isn't really anything. I don't think there's anything that stops them from that could prevent them necessarily from putting that into a contract. But it's you kind of ask the question to the person asking the question, how would you feel if that happened to you? And be they'd be completely fucking outrageous. This is the stupidest system ever. And you're yeah, right, it is the stupidest system ever, so I don't think it would happen.
Yeah.
It's in no one's interest to do that. So if you were the guy that owned the road, unless you had a personal vendetta against someone to block them from doing that, you wouldn't try to. But even then, as we kind of get further later into the question of the courts, I don't think there's any court that would exist that would find that a reasonable claim, really.
Yeah, I think it's kind of
if this person was restricted in their movement completely.
Yeah, you mentioned a good point, which is why the fuck would they do that? And it's kind of saying, say there is a little town or a village and they only have one supermarket, right? And now we're in the public, let's say we're in a socialist system and all the government runs all the supermarkets, right? And now you're advocating for a private system and say, oh no, supermarkets should be owned privately to have better food distribution at lower prices so people can afford food, blah, 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 blah. And then they retort, but then the private supermarket would be able to just gather all the food in the middle of the village and burn it down in front of the hungry people. It's yeah, they might be able to do that, but is that really how you run a successful supermarket? Is that how you make money?
Exactly, yeah.
No.
And I think there's another point. There's another point here as well, which is it's not out of the realm of possibility for the government to prevent you from going out on a street, right? There are curfews and
exactly
curfews that have been put effect throughout history, recent history. Which have prevented people from doing that, and that prevents you from leaving, and that's also there's nothing you can do about that as well. Partly because it applies to everyone, but also because you're facing off against the most powerful force in your whole society. Yeah. Whereas versus just a road company that would be one of many. And even if it wasn't one of many, there would still be competing interests. As well as that, there's another point that Rothbard raises here, which I think is quite interesting to think about, is the idea that you may end up living on a kind of co-op, essentially, maybe it's the suburb that you live in, maybe it's the apartment block that you live in. Maybe it's a much bigger area, maybe it's a much smaller area, but a space in which all of these services like roads, even insurance and healthcare and stuff are provided by this organization within which you live.
And maybe you are a stockholder
the key difference
as well.
Yeah, exactly. And the key difference to that, between that and, you know, what we kind of have now with local what's the word, like local government cooperatives, I guess, is that, well, I mean, anyone can join, firstly. I think it wouldn't necessarily avoid like that kind of like not in my backyard shit, but it would at least mean that like you have a say, I guess. Like you can go somewhere else, like you can stay there, you can try and change things, you can raise things because you actually have like a financial say in what happens as a customer, versus as like a you know, like the guy that goes to the local council meetings just to like yell at the council members, who never gets anywhere with anything because he's dealing with the local council.
Yeah, you
versus
can also,
someone who's actually like considered a customer.
There's also now the non-political solution. Like now, if you need a new road or bridge or whatever built, you need to lobby all these people. You need to get into politics and probably compromise your own integrity while doing so. Do a bunch of deals like, oh, if you want this new road, then you have to do this for me, and whereas in the private system,
You have to send money to Israel.
you have to go to the wall.
Yeah.
You want a bridge, I see. And so yeah, in the private system, you could just gather. If you have a lot of money, then you can just do it on your own. But you could just gather public support. You know, start a petition, GoFundMe, Kickstarter, or just, you know, a new startup company. Be like, hey, we want to, like, this company only has one project. It's building this road from here to there. Like, we want more tourism in our town or whatever. If you can just secure the land, then you're free to go to build your road. But right now, it's like, you know, it's kind of, you don't really think about it, but it's so insane, the system that we have right now. Like, literally, if you want to connect like two places on the map, like you can't just buy the land and do it. You have to like get all these government approvals for this and that and traffic laws and blah 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 blah. And it's like, man, yeah, sucks.
Yeah, it really does suck.
And
it is stupid.
Same goes, of course, for railway, right? If we're talking about like private and public railway, the biggest problem is not the actual trains, who owns the trains themselves. It's who owns the rails and who has the building permissions for putting down new rails and all this stuff, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, as we discussed with like Atlas Shrugged as well, to what extent are the railways regulated, and in what ways did that completely fuck over the businesses trying to run on them for, you know, sometimes very little like valid reason. You know, I think as well, like it's worth saying too, and this is mentioned in the book, like the idea that you would build your own road doesn't mean that, you know, you would just build this like rickety little bridge which runs over everyone's land and doesn't have any fucking speed regulations, doesn't have two-way roads or anything like that, or doesn't have stop signs. You know, it's not you would be free to do that, but you would probably be very, as you would be now too, very disincentivized from doing something like that. You know, Rothbard talks a lot about the railroads as well, like how the railroads, even though they were privately managed by different companies, the rail companies on these railroads as well, you know, they worked towards standardizing the kinds of equipment that was used and the kind of connectors and the sizes of the railroads and stuff like that, so that they could all work on the same places, all work on the same infrastructure. And that would obviously, I think it's fair that would probably be the case with the roads too, that maybe the signs look slightly different. You know, maybe there are some noticeable differences between different road companies, but they would employ like the same essential things. Because if, you know, as Rothbard said in this book, like if on one road green meant go and on another road red meant go, then you'd have a million traffic accidents all the time. and so you'd be forced to kind of standardize it in some way. I do think, as a slight pushback against that point, though, there is, and I'm definitely not bothered by this as much as some people would be, but I think for the people that would be bothered by it, it's a fair point to raise that there's kind of a lot of, if there is a lack of uniformity in ways, it makes the kind of cityscape very chaotic. Like Tokyo is a perfect example, how there's like multiple competing railroad companies for the subways, and so you go to a train station and there's like a million different, entrances to the different lines. That's not to say that the ideal scenario would be the train overlord that designs from the top down what he thinks is the perfect train station. But there is, I think, a valid kind of taste preference there of like, having some kind of uniformity. But, at the same time, it's like, when does that argument end? Like, you could say the same thing about housing. Like, oh, I don't like the fact that all the houses are different. I want them to look the same.
South Korea.
And you have a situation like San Francisco or something. Yeah. But I think the diversity is the good part about it. Yeah.
And if you think about just the inefficiencies in transportation or roads, more specifically, like congestion and potholes and just, bridges not being fixed on time, I think, yeah, of course, the advances would be enormous if we had a more privatized system, like not always dealing with these congested roads, as well as just more choice. There's always the debate about the speed limit. And, you could just have 2 or 3 or 10 roads, depending on what you like. Like, this road is 70 max. No one's going to go over 70. This one is 150. So if you are in a hurry and you are willing to risk a higher accident rate, then you can do so if you like. Yeah.
And also it's worth mentioning as well that these roads would probably cost different amounts to travel on. So we also have to talk about like the toll system too, because when you have roads that are private, obviously public roads are paid for by the taxpayer, including people that don't drive and have never driven cars. But in a private system, it would only be paid for by the people who actually used them.
Well,
which is, well, I mean, depending on what system is in place. But
yeah. So here's what I think about
go on.
I think, with long highways connecting cities and stuff like that, there would be probably something like a toll or subscription service where you like pay money and get access to specific roads. I think in the cities and suburban areas, it's like, again, we won't know until we get there, but I think it's extremely realistic that you will have big supermarket chains and just, your employers and stuff providing the roads completely free of charge, because they need the people to get to work and they need people to be able to go to their mall, and they would be the road company owners or have big shares in those. And so there would always be a kind of lobby fight between, like, say there's a powerful road company. Now all the big businesses in the area want to have influence in this company and get more shares, because of course they want people to be able to go to their like they want the shortest and quickest road to go to their supermarket, not the other one. So
sure.
I don't think that you would like have to pay money specifically to like move around in the city on roads.
Yeah, I mean it is also, it's hard to say though, right? Like there may be systems in which that is in place. There may be systems in which it's not in place, but the main point that I wanted to raise regarding that is like, and I think we've probably talked about this before, but how technology could be leveraged to make this like completely effortless. So today we have like the ETC system in Japan for toll roads, and toll roads are not private fully, but you basically stick a little credit card in your car, in like a little slot in your car, and then you can drive through the toll gates, and it just charges your credit card at the end of the month. Maybe there's a system like that. Maybe there's a system which is just like a subscription that you have, which is like connected to your registration number, so there's not even any kind of any real, there's less friction between, like, when it comes to access. But what I thought was like quite interesting is like Rothbard writing in what, like the 80s, 70s, 80s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was kind of already really tuned in to how technology would make these processes smoother, and the more that happens, the easier everyone's lives are. So there is there's obviously an interest there for anyone that wants to start a business to help make these kinds of payments go smoother, whether it's some kind of like PayPal system, or it could be like whether we're talking about like payments specifically, or whether we're talking about the technology used to like record how people are moving around. Like there's so much opportunity there for people to make money by providing a service to make everyone's lives better, which doesn't exist today, obviously.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess to connect that to my last point, I think, yeah, again, in the cities and just stuff where people need to go to work and buy stuff, that wouldn't even be necessary, I think, because you wouldn't want to even monitor or charge people for moving around. So it's but
sure.
Yeah, for sure, for the bigger highways and stuff, that makes a lot of sense. And we always forget how much of the economy is just trucks, I mean, so much absolutely vital cargo is all transported by trucks, and without it's in the utmost interest of businesses to make roads that are not congested and you can get your deliveries on time and all that. So just the post office alone,
and also
I could imagine a city where the post office completely owns all the roads and they keep them in top condition because otherwise they're fucked.
For sure. And yeah, exactly, because it's in the interest of these logistic companies to have quality roads to go on. Yes, I mean, there's like a million ways that you could think about how these problems could be solved, but the point is that they could completely be solved. There's another, so not just roads, but like streets, like pavement, sidewalks themselves. If they're private too, obviously we have this same, as you mentioned, this like interest of the people owning these roads to have foot traffic on them, because these connect to the businesses that are on these roads, on these streets. And as soon as like customers are involved, you kind of want to be as open as possible. But he also talks about security, and I mean, it's kind of, again, like I think it's a common criticism or like reaction response when hearing about private streets, like, isn't it just going to descend into anarchy? Like, how will these streets be safe if there's no like overriding police force that can come in and take care of things? And obviously the reality is that like that doesn't exist today in like many big cities in like Europe and America anyway. But as soon as like someone owns that road and has an interest to have people on that road, then they also have an interest to keep people safe. And not even just a financial interest, but also maybe even like a legal interest as well.
And clean.
And clean too. And one of the great points that he makes early in this chapter 11, I think it is like, he says, it is scarcely accidental that there are far more assaults and muggings on the streets outside stores than in the stores themselves. This is because the stores are supplied with watchful private guards, while on the streets we must all rely on the, quote, anarchy of government police protection. I thought that's just such a I've never really thought about that before, but like Yeah, why are the streets like this hellish landscape where anything can happen? And a store is kind of like, even, you see it in movies and stuff as well. Like, you see it in, like, someone's being chased down the street, they'll run into a shop for protection because there's just someone there, and suddenly you're now in this private space.
Yeah.
And now this person, they can either kick you out, or they can, they have the opportunity to try and protect you, or leverage some kind of protection that they have. And at the very least, like, inviting in violence to a shop is something that the last thing that you want as a business owner. So from like a safety perspective, like, God, yeah, it makes a lot more sense.
It's like, where would you rather hide when you are being chased by a stalker, in the mall, or in the public train station?
Exactly. But Phil, what about, so we've talked about the malls and, the big apartment blocks and the wealthier areas of society, but what about the poorer areas of society? This is like a pretty important question, right? Like, the assumption here is that the wealthier an area is, the higher quality of services they can afford to provide. What we could easily see in like this libertarian society is much bigger disparity between the services that are offered, right?
Well, I guess firstly, the disparity is, it's already here and it's natural. And, you already have the same shit with property taxes and all that. So, like, yeah, nice areas are nicer. Poor areas are not so nice. How would that change if you privatize roads? Well, first of all, they're still consumers, and they still buy shit, and they still go to work. And so if you, like, okay, let's take this from the Marxist perspective of these poor, exploited workers, right? I mean, the big chain, Starbucks, McDonald's, whatever, they still want their poor exploited workers to go to work and be there on time and arrive safely, so they can pay them their too low wage or whatever, right? So the businesses have the utmost interest to also incorporate all these people into the system smoothly. Otherwise, the literal workforce as well as their customer base will be, endangered.
I guess as well, like, if you're in an area that's like not as highly valued monetarily, like the property isn't very expensive. The roads also won't be expensive by themselves as well. So it's like, the consequence of buying and owning these roads financially is not nearly as big as elsewhere, and so the costs maybe won't be as bad either, or much more easy to absorb.
And you can also take it the opposite way of saying, there's a bunch of poor people in trailers without a fixed home. And in the private system, if they can only get permission, or just like pool together and get some land somewhere, or just get permission to be on the land, they can put all their trailers down and just, have the like medieval times, like just dirt roads, not necessarily asphalt yet, but yeah, they can just put all the trailers down, make little paths with a shovel, and this can be now a legit road if they wanted to, even if it has lower standards. But yeah, there's the barrier to achieving that is much lower than when you have all these building regulations. And
for sure.
Like, it's if you're a poor person right now, like the idea of putting down your trailer somewhere and like having a little dirt path that you make yourself with a shovel and connecting it to a public road and having it be recognized as a road, it's completely impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Like no one would.
Yeah. Unless you live in like Alaska or some shit.
Yeah, maybe.
If you own a big piece of land in Alaska. But no, yeah, you're totally right. Like, you wouldn't have those problems if you owned the land that you lived on.
And it's not like we want homeless people, So even if they, kick the homeless off the public streets, which one benefit is now we don't have the homeless everywhere. But it's not like, they do have to go somewhere. So I think it's actually not unlikely that big companies who don't want homeless in the inner city would provide some kind of space for them free of charge, where you can just put your tent or your whatever down, and you can make your own little path, and then you have your own little society over there. Because otherwise, you can always kick them out again, but they will come back into the inner city because there's nowhere else to go, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing. It's like not always like, it's easy to think of libertarianism as like equating only benefit to businesses, but it's really actually not the case. It means that every parcel of land is owned, and people have to act when things happen on that land that they don't want to happen, which was originally the job of the government. And also as well, like you said, talking about homeless people, it's like there are plenty of fucking homeless people today in like the UK, for example, and like nothing good is being done in that respect. Like, it's like clearly a very multifaceted problem, and
the big difference between private and government solutions to that problem is when you have a government solution, you now have a class of government employees, like a homeless office or whatever, whose employment and career hinges on the fact that there is a publicly visible homeless problem. As soon as they solve that problem, they solve themselves out of a job, right? Whereas if you have this problem privately solved, you actually have someone who is interested in removing a impediment to their business, right? They have all these homeless are in front of my store. How do I get them off the store, but also keep my publicly, like, socially green, whatever image that people like? I guess I'll have to provide a space for them somewhere where they can go and not here, right?
And also when you provide that space for them as well, it's still a financial liability on you. So the quicker you can find a solution to integrate these people and to to get them a way out of homelessness, that is in your interest as well.
Yeah.
Which is like the opposite of what we have today. So it's just like how do interests align, and that's what I think is so fascinating about libertarianism is like it's constantly trying to like pivot towards like financially, like things that are financially beneficial also being beneficial for everyone. And I think that's kind of the misunderstanding of libertarianism, is that it's like all about personal greed. It's all about like having your gated community or whatever, and your massive buildings that don't allow any random people in and stuff, and which would probably exist, but again, it also exists today too. So it's like, what is the difference?
Yeah, and not to open another jar on minimum wage laws, but how big of that is a factor in homelessness as well, right? Like, how many homeless problems could you solve by just being like, hey man, I have a business with one employee, I cannot pay you, but if you're willing to like close up the shop and clean a little bit in the evenings, I can, like, you can eat whatever's left,
For sure. Or even like in Japan, you have those like old retired guys that do like the security for apartments.
Yeah.
You probably, I don't even know if they must make minimum wage, I guess, legally, but
they're just kind of there.
Jobs like, well, I always kind of had the assumption that they weren't on minimum wage for some reason. I don't know why.
Volunteering.
But I mean, stuff like, just jobs that are like, you can like have more people do more things, which improves the livelihood of everyone. For people to work with people's lifestyles as well. With like old people, they specifically talking about old people, like most of them have some money, most of them have property, most of them are secure in like a lot of ways, but they want something to do with their time. They want to make a little bit of money so they can go have a nice dinner once a month or something. And so, they take like these small part-time jobs, maybe at a supermarket, maybe as like a security guard or something. And those, those massively improve like people's quality of lives at a small cost. And it works well with the lifestyle of the people doing them. So it's a society where you can do more of that. Say you just have a guy walking around picking up trash, for example, and he's paid like a small amount of money to do that. It's like better than it's better than sitting on the street all day and feeling hopeless and shit. It's at least something. But you can't do that today. You can't just like, even in like a local community, you can't just like, you have to involve the government in this thing, because the government are the only people that can legally be in charge of garbage disposal and shit like that. And there's all this red tape and
plus minimum wage. Like, you're not actually gonna make
plus minimum wage
a profit by paying someone $30 an hour, $13 an hour to like pick up trash. And you have all these people who are old or disabled or don't speak the language yet or whatever, and for some reason like they're not at that minimum wage point where they can participate in the economy. And so we just tell them, so you just cannot participate at all. You just cannot work. Yeah. Or they're just like, they then become like the responsibility of the taxpayer, which is like, it's fine if you want to support that, but it's not, that's another thing as well. Like, there's nothing stopping any community from being like a, this altruistic, beacon where they provide like welfare to like people in those sorts of positions and stuff. It's not incompatible with this world, I think, that Rothbard talks about. Not at all. No.
The point is that it's like completely voluntary, right?
Yeah.
And as well, things like, we'll talk about police too, but like and the legal side of things, like even if there were privatized courts and privatized police, like there's nothing stopping, and there's no reason to assume there wouldn't be free police aid and free legal aid for people that can't afford it. Maybe there would be some conditions, maybe there wouldn't, but there are a lot of interests that may align with making that happen.
Yep. And just to close out this point about public spaces and whatnot, I was thinking recently about how important it actually is to have like small restaurants and like shops in your area. Like how much, when I think back about the area I was living in Sapporo, we had that one okonomiyaki place, Nanjiya, which we always went to. And I was thinking like in my, in your considerations of choosing a place to live, like there's rent and there's the distance to the station and all this and that, but just the quality of life improves so massively by having like these couple of like family owned restaurants or supermarkets or whatever in your area. And a lot of people who left New York are talking about how New York went to shit because, especially during COVID, all these places just went under, and now you have all these like big touristy just one slice pizza places where you used to have like your local gathering place for the actual locals. And it's kind of nuts how big a factor that is in like wanting to live somewhere and choosing to, I don't know, like it's almost like a real determining factor in rent, I feel like,
Yeah, and I think it's often like a big misunderstanding or like mischaracterization of like what a free market would do by like detractors who are like worried, rightly worried about like their cities just turning into like McDonald's and shit. But yeah, like you said, the reality is like a lot of people really value that, and also as well, like all the times, like every single fucking time I have seen like a small business go under in my hometown in Cardiff, it's been something to do with like the government.
Of course. Yeah.
Like it's always like someone like they want to build a fucking massive like public car park or some shit, or like, you know, the nationalized university want to build more student accommodation or something like that. You know, like obviously private has a big thing to play here, but that private companies can't force you out of a business. Like they can definitely, you know, you can buy out a landlord that owns a pub, for example. That's a different thing. Or like a landlord that owns a chain of shops, sure. But like the government can do that too. And yeah, like another thing as well is like with small businesses, it's just so fucking hard because you don't have the resources to deal with the same regulation that these bigger companies have to deal with. Like all the food, health, safety, like shit in the UK for restaurants, like
It's nuts.
you know, it's like it's such a waste of people's time, and it not that food safety isn't important, but it's like all of that, dealing with all of that is an administrative problem that takes resources, which is time and money of a business. And the bigger your business is, the easier they can float that, the easier they can digest that cost. But you know, the more, like, if you want to, for example, build a terrace on your property to have like outside dining, suddenly you have to deal with the local council who are going to come around like fucking thugs and like tell you to shut that shit down because it's like a public eyesore because they've had like 3 complaints from random people in the town. You know, stuff like that. Like it's your property until it isn't. And there's so little that you can do with that. And if you're a business that's actually trying to really succeed and do something special, like dealing with that shit is a nightmare. So I think it would be amazing for small business to have more freedom.
Yeah, and it's always,
I mean,
it's always
you know,
McDonald's and Walmart who are pushing more regulation, more minimum wage laws, and all this, right?
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
So it's like they know that this is the way to stomp out all the small ones. So
exactly.
all right.
Yeah.
I want to talk about pollution for sure, but maybe the smoother segue is,
I think,
law and police. What do you think?
Well, I was thinking pollution actually kind of connects to what we were just talking about there with like building a terrace, for example, right? Like, we do have, you know, there is a situation, you know, a restaurant wants to build a terrace, but the terrace has like a DJ on it that's blasting music onto the street. Like, is that okay in a libertarian world? Like, you know, do I just have to deal with it because the DJ decks are on the property of the land? Or like, is there something I can do about it? Rothbard would argue that there are like intangible but still really important parts of property, which include things like, you know, like natural pollution, sound pollution, and light pollution and stuff like that, which can definitely be dissolved within this libertarian framework and like worked within this libertarian framework. When you have people dealing with, you know, in this case it would be like a one-on-one thing. So if you happen to live next door to this restaurant, DJ club, whatever, you know, you can raise a complaint with those people directly, and you can make a case for yourself. And I guess the difference here is that you're not kind of running to this all-powerful council that will just go and shut the thing down, but you can actually kind of directly negotiate, obviously with lawyers and like a court and stuff, but it's much less about like tattling to the government and getting them to do your henchman job, and it's more about like actually just solving the problem in like a just way.
And it's about, in the case of pollution and noise pollution, he puts the emphasis on really harm, right? Like bodily harm as well, like certain levels of poisons in the air, or just like too loud noise or whatever is harmful
Yeah.
to your body, and that would be an act of aggression in the libertarian framework. And so he mentions, I think this is a really good example, is the government outlawing of class action lawsuits in the aerospace industry. So right when airplanes used to get really popular in the US, and a lot of people suddenly had airplanes and airports close to their house flying over and just being very loud. In the common law, you used to have this tradition of class action lawsuits where a bunch of people who are damaged by the same aggressor put their resources together and they sue them on behalf of their group. But the government said, no, we really like airplanes actually, and so we're gonna just make it so that you cannot have class action lawsuits in this industry. So yeah, you could only, like, as an individual Joe Schmo, you can like try and sue American Airlines. Good luck. But yeah, so
yeah,
it's like a very specific example of government and big business putting their resources together to fuck over your personal rights. Same as with the pollution from factories in the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, exactly. And these are like examples where the quote unquote public good is quoted as being more important than, the liberty of the individuals. And it's like so blatantly like it's like a calculated way of avoiding any consequence, and you see it with healthcare and stuff like that as well. It would be probably a lot easier. It would arise much more naturally without those kinds of restrictions.
I find the Rothbard point on pollution very interesting because I think it's very strong. It kind of disarms the leftist point on environmental stuff while making it stronger and make sense. But you rarely ever hear like Dave Smith or whoever, like popular libertarian commentators, talk about this pollution aspect of libertarianism, right? All the environmental stuff. Like what Rothbard makes clear is that having a clean environment and not having poisonous substances in the air is a concern in the libertarian system, and that air pollution, for example, is an aggression by a business or whatever against you, and that you should be able to take legal action and protect yourself against this. Whereas and he kind of says that the Ayn Rand point of view is just to yada yada over it and say no such thing going, which I can't comment to that whether that's really true or not, but he'd say like the Ayn Rand point of view is just to completely deny the problem and say nope, there is ignore
the problem exists.
Yeah, there is no pollution. Goodbye. Business is great. You suck. But that's not the libertarian. I don't know if that really is the Ayn Rand point of view, but it's not the Rothbardian point of view. And the Rothbardian point of view is that you have
for sure
personal rights not to be aggressed upon. Air pollution is an example of that. Like if someone blows cancerous substances into your lungs, they are harming you, and you ought to be able to protect yourself against that,
Yeah. And so really this is a good point to talk about like ocean pollution as well, and that was one of the really interesting points in this book too. Again, you can kind of imagine if you kind of immediately hearing about privatization of the oceans, you'd be thinking like, oh shit, but then they're just going to use it completely for their own benefit, and it's just going to fuck over the ocean completely. The oceans and all the riverbeds and all that are going to be destroyed by business. And then the question is like, why would they destroy this resource that they own?
We're back to the village burning down the supermarket, Yeah.
Exactly. Like if you rely on the ocean, if you have a parcel of ocean for yourself that you can use for fishing, it's in your interest that there's a thriving ecosystem of fish there to gain from. Firstly, I mean, if you look at farms today as well, like there's like local farmers have a huge vested interest in keeping not only their own farms clean, but they're actually like the whole ecosystem surrounding the farm, the town's connected as well. Like they all benefit from that care that's put into the land, whether it's like, you know, warding off like invasive species, it's like trimming hedges and stuff like that. It's like making sure there isn't land that's got loads of fucking nuclear waste in it and shit. It's all like in the interest of the people that own the land that it doesn't go like that. And with the oceans too, like you would expect the same thing. Like, firstly, you don't want to be polluting on your own land, on your own ocean, because that would, you know, what. There's no reason that you'd want to own an ocean just to pollute it, right?
Yeah.
I don't think, unless you literally wanted like a pool to throw lots of shit into. But even then, like, you're dealing with an ocean which carries off everywhere else in the world. And so if you have your ocean parcel of ocean which you just throw nuclear waste into, it's gonna get somewhere else, and then your neighbors who own their land they're gonna sue you because you've thrown nuclear waste that's landed in their ocean.
Yeah, it's like
so.
The anti-libertarian point of saying like, oh, you could just buy your own little garbage plot of ocean and throw all your shit in it. It's like saying if we had private property, like if people were allowed to own their lawns, you could just drive your car on your own place, and then, you know, have it run over the next lawn as well. And it's like, no, once you cross over to the other lawn, that's now where it's not. It's, you know, you're in trouble now. You're liable now.
Exactly. And I think, and also if you look at the situation today, like most of these oceans, the oceans are owned by the state mostly, aside from, you know, what are they called? The zones where no one owns the ocean.
So basically the actual ocean, the actual big oceans are unowned. It's completely tragedy of the commons.
Yeah.
And you have the IMO, International Maritime Organization, of all countries that have something to say, basically, except like North Korea and shit, who are in that and who make regulations on, for example, seafaring and like the traffic rules on the ocean and all that. Like, but they're not specifically owned themselves by the IMO, the oceans. And then you have your
right
exclusionary zone, like, well, you have a certain zone of around the coastal areas and around islands that are like literally the territory of that country, and then you also have economic zones within that. But yeah, the vast majority of the oceans are unowned. Technically, it's like a tragedy of the commons, kind of. You just take as many candies as you want and fuck everyone over.
Yeah. Well, exactly. That's it. Like, you have a situation now where it's like, okay, I have this like unowned piece of land. There's this unowned piece of ocean where anything can be done, anything can happen. There's no consequence. Whatever I do, maybe we have a couple of like ecological organizations that'll shout at us, but really, like, we're the state. We have all the power to do what we want. You know, now it's just like you can just do whatever you want with it, which is like surely a worse situation than, you know, we love the idea of like nature being unowned by anyone, but like, what is the consequence of that?
It's also interesting how a lot of these restrictions now are extending from whatever your nationality is. For example, I think it's Antarctica. Like, as a German, I cannot just go to Antarctica. I cannot. It's prohibited. But not by Antarctica, by Germany, right? So if I go to Antarctica...
Of course they did.
Yeah. The German government will treat me as a criminal. So, you know...
but they won't be able to come and arrest you because they won't be able to go there as well.
Well, they have bases there. But, no...
What the fuck?
No, just because it's like, research base. I don't know if they have government bases there, but it's...
Sure.
No, this actually comes up in nautical stuff sometimes. If you're on a cruise ship, sometimes the cruise ship company will have like an Antarctica tour, like, oh, you can go on shore a bit and take some pictures. And it's like, whether you're really allowed to do that or not, you can't just listen to the cruise ship company and believe. It actually depends what your national regulations are, like depending on what country you're from, right? And so, yeah, that's actually how a lot of these publicly owned, like, or unowned spaces are regulated, not by the space itself or the authority of the space, but by whatever country you were born in. Government claims it. Like, it's the same thing. Like, you have to pay taxes even though you live somewhere else, kind of shit, right?
Yeah. For sure. Interesting. So yeah, pollution. I feel like that's quite a satisfactory answer, to be honest. Like, in this, from our boy Rothbard.
And you can also imagine like why this isn't really part of the public discourse in libertarianism, because this would just go under among all the screaming. Like, if you explain this Rothbardian point on pollution, conservatives would just go, "Oh, you're libs."
Yeah. I mean, it's the same with war as well.
Yeah.
Like, anytime you talk about fucking conscription, people will call you a pussy. Like, oh yeah, it's so cool that you were forced to fight in a war. Otherwise be put in prison. That's so cool.
You're such you're such a hero because you didn't have a choice.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Let's talk about police, because I think we have a couple of things to talk about with this, and it's quite probably fairly understandably a tricky thing to get your head around. So obviously we are envisioning a society here where everything is privatized, and that extends to the police, it extends to the court system. But how would this work? So what does a private free market police system look like? Well, how, like, let's start with some of the main differences. Obviously there wouldn't be like a national police force, there wouldn't be like a national army necessarily. We would probably be dealing with slightly smaller units, maybe. And if we weren't, it would all be based on the idea of like gaining a profit. So what is the profit? What is the value of the police?
Yeah, so I think there are two, similar to the roads, I think there are two ways this can go, and it will probably be a little bit of both depending on where you are. But there's one model where the immediate customer, or well, yeah, not the immediate customer, but the immediate person involved would be paying for it. So let's say like you have some kind of altercation, police comes, blah blah blah, and then you pay them right there and that for whatever service they did to you, or like you want to call the police, that costs money. I don't think that's a very sustainable system, because you have like this barrier of people not wanting to do it because they don't want to pay. Another way would be you have like a subscription system that maybe already also comes with just having ownership, or just having like a place, right? Like, let's say in whatever town you live in, it's kind of standardized that if you rent an apartment, you also like have to pay $10 a month to the police package, and so you get all the police services. I think that's definitely possible. I think another, probably in cities, a more probable system is that the individual is completely unengaged with the entire system, and that it really is between businesses and the police system itself. So let's say around like in the intercity, you have a bunch of big businesses, you have some malls, you have theaters, you have, I don't know, supermarkets, 7-Elevens, all these places. And they, of course, want that people can safely get to their stores, can safely buy stuff. If there's an altercation, they want it solved without any like racial police incident or whatever is your current concern. And so all these businesses would pay the policing company or the security company to solve all that shit. And, you know, if something happens, you know, it would be like a mall cop. You know, they come up to you, they solve the thing with you, but you don't have to pay them, right? It's already paid for by the company.
Yeah, exactly. It's basically something that we would already have now within shops, which people clearly want in their own shops, extended to other areas of private property like roads.
Yeah, and again, if the roads are privately owned, then you've also kind of addressed that problem, right? Like now, whatever company owns the roads is probably also going to want to police them, whether they do that themselves or they hire someone.
Yeah. But Phil, if we have like these like different companies of like armed police forces, like what's stopping them from fighting with each other over something?
Right.
You know, suddenly you have these like these companies are competing with each other, right? And they're all armed. You know, surely that's like a dangerous situation, right?
Well, first of all, compared against what? Against World War II? I don't know. And because that is the alternative when you have government policing and military, right? But the second obvious answer is that, again, they are in the business of, you know, providing a service for profit. And how would it be profitable to just have like a brawl in the streets? Like let's say even Apple, like Apple and Microsoft are competing, right? What's stopping Apple from attacking a Microsoft office or store and like killing all their smartest engineers and taking all their stuff? Is it really the law? Is it really government outlawing of such acts? No, it really is the market pressure of if they do this, Apple is done. No one's buying an iPhone anymore. You are over, right? And so, you don't want to antagonize your customer base or just public sentiment in general. And so, you wouldn't do that unless tensions are actually so high that the majority of people actually want this conflict to go down, right? Like, let's say, for example, you have like you have one police company that's very small. It's extremely racist. Like this is a police company that's explicitly racist. It's like their mission to treat other people differently depending on their skin color or whatever. And public sentiment, of course, is really against them. Now you can actually envision another police company going in and saying, hey, we're going to disarm you guys. Like, we're going to take all your guns away because there's actually a lot of incidents of you shooting people for being green or whatever. And now they could probably, like, all the other police companies could probably band together and disarm them, even if some shots are fired during that exchange. And public sentiment would be like, that's what we wanted them to do. Thank you.
Yeah. And then there would be some kind of court proceeding where a punishment would apply, which would be, you know, in probably in favor of the general public sentiment, right? Like it would have to be. It's difficult to talk about any of this without talking about the courts, but to just put that in a nutshell, like, it would be in the interest of a private court to offer a verdict which is in keeping with the quote unquote public sentiment. Or like what people think is quote unquote common sense, right? Like we always talk about, like, there's always like this conversation of like common sense in law, but like I think the reality is with like public courts is really like, you know, a judge can get a bad reputation for being a certain way, but there's, you know, you still don't really have control over whether they'll be presiding over your case or not, right?
The Soros DAs. But just to throw a keyword in there. But yeah, I mean, and that public sentiment wouldn't necessarily only be the current like spur of the moment sentiment. It would also be the interest of big business, and let's say like you have a case where public sentiment is clearly in favor of person A, but just on the letter of the law or the rules, person B is in the right. It's not necessarily the case that private court would always rule for person A, right? Even if that's against public sentiment, they would rule for what would
sure
they think in the long run people would think is the right decision. And like if that means making an unpopular ruling but keeping within the letter of the law and what was agreed upon and the contract or whatever, then that would ensure their long-term survival. Whereas if they break their own rules and laws and contracts just for public sentiment, then they would lose a lot of their credibility as being like a fair arbiter, right?
Yeah, that's true.
I think, interestingly enough, I've been confronted a lot recently with private courts, which we actually already have in our current systems all the time, everywhere. And those are called arbitration societies. You have them mostly for specialized interest groups. For example, in the nautical environment, they're very common. Like a lot of disputes, instead of going to court, people go to private arbitration societies, where you have specialists from the industry. Like, when a case like a big, like two ships collide or whatever. Of course, there's also now a criminal suit involved, but you can also settle a lot of the damages and all that in private courts, where you actually have, people who used to work on a ship and know what the fuck's going on, instead of like some, public judge who never has been on a ship and doesn't know what they're talking about. And those decisions are also publicly recognized and binding. Like if a private arbitration society makes a ruling, it now is like a legit ruling, and you can't just run away from that.
So two points on that. Firstly, I think like what you arrive at in that kind of system is like it's compensation rather than like this abstract idea of punishment, or this almost like religious idea of punishment, which you see so much on like the conservative side, especially when it comes to the police. Like, oh, I'm fucking glad we got that guy deported, like good fucking riddance, that kind of like rhetoric, and like I hope they go to jail for 1 million years because they stole a sandwich or some shit. Like people getting so fucking crazy about power, like whereas you would be probably pretty limited in doing that kind of thing, and or at the very least, like there would be much more of an emphasis on compensation for damages rather than this like super emotionalized like system and this concept of like punishment. My second point was, I've forgotten it because I have the memory of a snail.
That's okay.
What was your point?
I mean, I do think we have talked a lot about court stuff already in a past episode, but and I think we've talked about like how you could implement the mechanisms of what is the word you used with the C? Not reparations.
Compensation,
right? Like instead of having like a pure punitive measure of like punishing this guy, like, oh, you're a bad person, so now you have to stand in a corner and count to 10,000. Like instead, you would want something that actually benefits the victim.
Right.
And so we've talked about like this person has to do continual payments and how that could work with technology. Mm-hmm. Like you integrate the court systems with big employers, and so if you work at a company now, automatically 10% of your wage goes to this victim until you paid your compensation amount or whatever. I think this is one of those things where there are infinite free market possibilities, and it's kind of pointless to speculate, but for sure it can be done. Yeah.
And like, stuff like security in that as well, like, you could ask the question like, what, if arbitration settled, but there's no, monopolistic force that obliges someone to do that, surely they can just like run away and avoid it forever. And it's like, yeah, they could do that, as they could probably do it today, but this person who has committed this crime probably has a job, probably has some kind of property, probably has something which is connected to another person, and it's in the interest of all those people connected to that person financially to see that problem is addressed. Otherwise, it's kind of a black stain on their own business. So if this guy has a job at a company, you don't want to be a company who's hiring this guy who's running away from some arbitration payment, right? So you either dock his wage directly, you either fire him, and then it, maybe there's a system by which people can share this information, which there would very realistically be, so that it would be very hard for this person to get a job in the future, for example, right? Like, which would be a huge disincentivizing force against not obliging that settlement.
And this brings us to the Irish example. It's one of my favorite examples in the book, I think, of Old Ireland, which Rothbard says is basically kind of an anarchic society for hundreds of years, where you have court mechanisms and all that, and you have, you technically do also have kings who hold the title of king, but they don't have the kind of power that, medieval Central European kings would have. And yeah, the legal system is this kind of decentralized council of elders who, like, you go to when you have a problem, they solve your dispute. No one can force you to abide by whatever they decide, but, if you don't, you kind of put a target on your back by, if you're a merchant and your business is not just what you sell, your business is also trust, right? And if you disobey like a ruling by this body of elders, which is well respected, now you've basically fucked yourself because no one wants to do business with you anymore. So yeah, effectively you can maybe go to another place and start up there all over again, which, back then was more possible because you wouldn't have the internet and information sharing, but it was also less possible just because it's so difficult to move space and like just set up shop somewhere else.
I mean, even exactly, like the American frontier, like I feel like is a classic example for that. Like you have outlaws that run away and find some old town that they can hide in. But again, it's like, what is the realistic, like, what is that like in reality? Suddenly you have this like guy, this what would probably be profiled as like quite suspicious, single person, probably male, probably like of working age, comes to town by himself, has like, a backstory settled out for himself, but that you can maybe get away with that, but probably not forever. And I mean, now that would just be impossible with technology, the technology that exists. But I mean, it was kind of, it was very risky back then too, I think. One thing that I'm kind of realizing through this discussion and just generally through reading as well is that, like, so we're talking about the institutions like courts and police, but maybe like a better way of thinking about this is not, maybe one of the things that makes it difficult to understand is like we're talking about a private version of a thing that already exists publicly, but what these things are really doing, like the merchant, for example, he's selling trust. The police are selling safety. Like the courts are selling trust and reputation and fairness and justice. And that is like that's where they make their money. So it's not that you have these existing public things becoming private and then seeking the private ends that they do today already, like if we talk about like police corruption, for example, it's actually more that you're opening up the space for there to be a private access to safety, for example, right? So the thing that you're seeking is safety. The thing you're not seeking the police as it is today. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it would be completely different body or solution to the problem. I think we've talked about this with education, but privatizing education doesn't mean that you now have private universities everywhere. It probably means that you probably have no universities anymore, and you have like very probably have like very specialized training schools by companies. Like, hey, you want to work at like, I don't know, Samsung, like this is our training place where we will intensely for 1 year teach you how our smartphones are made, and maybe you sign like a NDA or something that you can't use this knowledge to work at Sony or whatever now. But
yeah, for sure. So
yeah, different problems,
cool.
Different solutions to existing problems, for sure.
So I think we can probably move on to the discussion of war and foreign policy.
Yep.
I think, right? I feel like we've gone through everything else. So we've talked about all these like granular specifics of how life would work, but you know, war is a constant reality throughout human history. Like protection of a broad piece of a broad area of like land, protection of a society is seen as something that only a state can provide. What is the Rothbardian answer to that? Got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, there's a lot. First of all, I would say that the record seems to indicate that it really isn't protection at all that the states have provided, but instead war and the opposite of protection. You know, why would someone from America have to go and fight in Vietnam? Like, why? How is that protecting him and his family? Of course it's not. It's it's complete abstract battle of interests between politicians, and in no way whatsoever is government military actually protecting the citizens. Even if you have two countries that attack each other, conscription is a kind of different thing. And if you have conscription, then we're all fucked anyway. But even if you don't have conscription, it's not clear why, like, this guy from the west side should now be in battle with someone from this other country when they're only attacking the east side or whatever. And it's just a way to ensure that these conflicts escalate exponentially on the macro level, and a lot more people get involved than need be. Let's not forget that all the big tragedies of the 20th century are results, World War II and this and that these are all results of what statists call government protection, right? Of government defense. So it's just not at all workable in its current form. The second point would be that I think we've talked about this before as well, but between states now you do have anarchy, right? You don't have a third overarching authority between Russia and the US. So between these two entities, you don't have a government system, you have an anarchic system, which is the same that we propose between, just to be between individuals, right? So the government solution to defense isn't a solution, because you hit a wall at some point where the systems reach their limit, and the only way you could solve this with government theory would be to say that we need a world government or a universe government that takes care of everyone, which is basically like the ultimate oppression. But
and I mean, it's arguably also what all these countries are currently fighting for as well. it's very clear that like America's foreign policy is they basically act as world police and have acted as world police for like over 50 years now. And yeah, what has that brought us? Like, that hasn't brought us any more peace. I think we talked about this probably in the first episode about, just fundamentally, like, libertarianism is against war and against killing especially, and doesn't see state sanctioned killing as any more moral as killing your neighbor or killing anyone else. One thing I was thinking today was about this kind of, you pointed towards it, this like American foreign policy in anywhere really. The conservatives especially celebrate when America is annihilated some leader of some Middle Eastern country or something, as if it really like actually tangibly benefits anyone at home. And it's like, if that guy was killed or if he wasn't killed, you would not fucking know. But for some reason it's like celebrated, this kind of like dominance.
Yeah, and now of course Rothbard mentions this as well. Now the entire country of Americans has a target on their back, right? Like now you're all fair game in the eyes of some radical leader in another country, even though you literally didn't do anything, and maybe you didn't even vote for the guy who started the war, and you don't even want to pay taxes, but you have to. And just by being part of this country, now you have, you've been exposed as a target for another country because your military decided to bomb some village over there, right?
Yeah.
And how is that defending you?
Exactly. He kind of went in a little bit of a tangent talking about like the Middle Ages and wars between rival kingdoms, and in these battles, like the masses of just the common population weren't involved at all. They weren't kind of prized targets by any means, because they really didn't have a stake, to the point where they even just kind of watched the battles happen as like sport. And maybe we'd see a similar thing like that in a libertarian world if in some bizarre situation Samsung ended up having a war with Apple. It would be the people involved rather than these innocent civilians. That would be massively more just. I think there's something to say about like we're in a really dark situation with like nuclear weaponry and stuff, and like weapons of mass destruction. So technologically it's kind of like complicated, but yeah, I think there's this important point to make. Like, private citizens can get involved in war if they want, but they can also choose not to be if they don't, and they shouldn't be treated as targets because of that, like regardless.
I don't even know if you can have really war in a private system, you can have individual conflicts and they can be big, but can you, like, is war really even conceivable? I mean, you would really have to like gain a lot of people to like decide. I mean, you can have a war between a private society and a government, right? Like American Revolution style, where you've
of course, yeah,
voluntary armies and whatnot. But it's hard to imagine really like a war, where you have two groups fighting each other, like without conscription and all that.
Yeah,
like why?
For sure. So I mean, that reminded me of the latter half of Atlas Shrugged, where there's the big discourse about weaponry and the fact that there's almost like this great, just like beautiful passages about how weapons are like the antithesis of value, and like weapons that are designed to kill people are like the antithesis of valuable to humans, and which like points to this, what I think is true, which is like weapons used to, you know, to kill other people in acts of violence are like inherently non-valuable, and it's really only the government that permits them to have value for these military exploits. You know, we talk about like this like really annoying like very very Reddit like Fallout 3 thing of like, you know, war is good for business. It's like war is not good for business. War is good for government contracts. Like war is good for government business. Like if you work for Lockheed Martin, like you're not getting money from anyone other than the government, really, right?
Yeah.
Like,
it's
they're
really
your top customer.
Unprofitable company in the free market. Yeah.
Completely unprofitable. Like there's no one who wants fucking nuclear weapons. Like, you know, yeah.
Yeah, and at the price it would cost to make them, like you had, if you think about what are the big free market inventions? Like everything from medicine to cars, like everything. What are some things that were invented not through the market but only through government? Oh, well, the atom bomb.
Literally.
Yeah.
The atom bomb and the fucking pyramids.
Over the jury's still out on that, but
yeah. But there's this question of like, yeah, all of these people that are like, it's like one of the most technologically advanced industries, weaponry. But like shit, like what if we put that towards things that people actually wanted?
Right, that's another
like
side,
all that,
the opportunity
all that brain
cost.
power.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, we lose that.
Like we decided not to have flying cars so we can nuke each other. Nice.
Yeah, exactly. Great. I love life. I love the world. Yeah. So generally, yeah, I think the libertarian point is pretty clear cut on that. Like war is not good. In the case of like guerrilla warfare, he makes it a distinction. In that guerrilla warfare is like a popular army, you know, like the Revolutionary Americans or like the Viet Cong or Viet Minh.
I think he talks about the Indian,
the Revolutionary Vietnamese,
the Pakistani thing as well.
Right. But like these are all like armies that are, well, most of them are not backed by government and are actually like actively quelled by the government, but they're popular armies, so people join them. I mean, there's probably a lot of social pressure to join, but they do have freedom not to, and they are supported by aid from the communities that they come from. So, you know, like there's obviously, like, given the period this book was written in, there's a lot of talk about like invasion of Russia, and you know, today, looking back today, we can see how all of that discussion was just so ridiculous. We also get a quote from Buckley, the guy that we have read, The Party in the Deep Blue Sea, who's kind of echoing his same sort of sentiment about, you know, we either go to war or we don't, or we die, or, you know, red or dead kind of shit as well. Like, but maybe you don't actually have to do any of that, you know?
Yeah, it's like America only has an antagonism with the USSR because they both are racing toward nuclear weapons and space and fighting in each other in different countries. And it's like if you had a completely isolated in the foreign policy sense, not in the trade sense, an isolationist foreign policy, you only concern yourself with yourself and, you know, free trade and everything.
Yeah.
Like, well, now you don't have to worry about these guys wanting to nuke you anymore.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, the word isolationist.
And I mean, even
Go on.
go ahead.
Yeah, the word isolationist.
I was going to move to a slightly different point.
Is interesting because, as Rothbard mentions, it was kind of brought about as a kind of slur almost. Toward people who, and it's still used that way today. Like basically, like the only lesson from World War II is that appeasement is bad and war is always like you always want to escalate, and like
yeah.
It's like we need to be world police, and isolationism is bad because now you're basically fueling Putin and Hitler and whatever. But it's completely well, we've already talked about why those are bad points, but it's also incompatible with the other sense of isolationism in trade, right? We talk about protectionism and isolationism in trade.
Yeah.
And what, for example, the current Trump policy is more on the protectionist side, whereas isolationism would be a more, or not, maybe some people would call it globalism, which again has a different context in the defense discussion. But you either have either free trade or you have tariff, right? And having free trade goes hand in hand with being isolationist on defense.
Yes.
But having protectionism goes hand in hand with being globalist in the defense sense, right? So that already tells you that this kind of doesn't make sense.
For sure. So isolationism here meaning a lack of engagement with global political issues, not getting involved in other people's business politically, but freely trading, freely exchanging culture, freely allowing people to come through, basically just not being a bully.
All right, you were about to say something.
There was, I've already forgotten it. So,
mission accomplished.
I think there's another really good point too, and this goes back to the Ireland story. Rothbard has like a big hard-on for Ireland, I think. One thing he talked about was like, you know, if you're worried about like Russia invading America, if there is no government in America, what exactly is Russia going to invade? Like you see everywhere throughout history, whether it's like the Russian Revolution or whatever, like these forces come in and they take control of an existing government infrastructure, and that's how they transfer power. But if there's if all you have are like these businesses and private enterprises, there's no central like heart to anything. There's nothing that you can, once you've got that, you've got everything, right? And that's why, you know, throughout history, it's been so difficult for governments to get control of countries that have very small governments or no government at all, because there is no, you know, you're just dealing with this decentralized system, and no one wants you there, so everyone's going to attack you, and they're all orchestrating themselves independently. So it would be a nightmare. I mean, but then, and also it's just like, fuck, man. Like with the Russia thing specifically, like, you know, Russia's tried to take back control of Ukraine and they haven't not done a very good job. Like really, like it's such a massive drain of resources to do anything like this anyway. Especially today with like how sophisticated the technology is and how sophisticated the states are. So I really, it would require like a huge reason to do that. And again, as well, like all these in this like libertarian society, all of these businesses won't just be serving the region that they operate in, they would also be valuable to all other places around the world too if they were international businesses. So if there were only one libertarian society in the world, for example, there would still probably be many nation states that would want the businesses in that region to succeed. And whilst maybe, obviously, the libertarian society wouldn't advocate for defense from another state, but obviously they wouldn't be able to control whether they do that or not. But it would at least be, that would also be a deterrent too, technically.
I think an interesting thing to think about is how would that work? Because as we said before, a lot of regulations are coming from your birth country or your citizenship country. So let's say we set up this libertarian country or society or whatever where you don't pay taxes and you live according to like Rothbard libertarianism. And now you make a business there and you make a lot of money, and a lot of companies, Apple, Microsoft, actually put their offices there because then they don't get taxed and, you know, the businesses flourish. You would probably have a lot of countries now claiming, oh, because you were a citizen or you came from here, you still have to pay taxes to us. And now they actually would have like an incentive to try and attack this libertarian society, right? Where they're like, oh, well, you got to shut this shit down or we'll leave all our productive people and they won't be paying taxes. It's kind of a little bit of sci-fi, but yeah, it's interesting to think about.
It's definitely possible. It's definitely not impossible. At the same time, it's also like, what are you going to do? Like, what is the state going to do about it? But also as well, like, I think that is kind of a natural response from any state to destroy anything that's perfectly free. You know, you can just imagine you try and create your little commune in the countryside where you have all your own rules. As soon as you reach any, you know, kind of scale, the government's probably going to come in and shut it down, as they have done in the past. And as we've seen in our sci-fi books.
Just one more note on defense. Like, it's not clear to me at all that having like a more centralized and quote-unquote stronger government defense apparatus really means that you are better defended in case a war breaks out. Like, you wouldn't look at Europe in World War II and say, well, a lot of the countries with the strongest armies, like Britain or Germany, you know, they had the most defense, and Russia, say, but were the people in those countries really defended the best? Were they really the ones that had the best out, like they were the safest in the war? Or was it really people in countries like Switzerland or whatever who really didn't have much defense and didn't really engage? Like, wouldn't you have been more defended in that place?
For sure. I mean, I think about Wales. Like, Wales is never getting involved in any fucking war. Like, Wales doesn't have anything to say, really. And I think that's good.
Yeah, and it's like, and like, let's say you're in this small country, we'll call it Blurbistan. You're in Blurbistan, and, you know, they're now saying, like, oh, but Russia is so much more bigger than us, and if they attack us, then we need to be able to defend ourselves. So, like, we built this big apparatus, and, like, we'll go to all-out war with Russia if they attack. And it's like, you know, is that really better for us than just being steamrolled by, like, is that really the better scenario where we use 80% of our people to fight and die and they will still fuck us? Or would it be better to just be like, okay, I guess we're part of Russia now. Well, fuck it. And then after that, you can still have, like, internal... You know, you make alliances with other people in the same scenario, like, hey, we didn't actually want to be part of Russia. Let's do like a little internal revolution. Like, that's probably much better than, you know, this quote unquote defense strategy, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely possible. There's one quote I wanted to read, and maybe we can move on from here. But it goes as follows. It's war as the health of the state. Many libertarians are uncomfortable with foreign policy matters and prefer to spend their energies either on fundamental questions of libertarian theory or on such domestic concerns as the free market privatization of postal service or garbage disposal. Yet an attack on war or a warlike foreign policy is of crucial importance to libertarians. There are two reasons. I'll just read the second reason. The other reason is that, apart from the nuclear menace, war, in the words of the libertarian Randolph Bourne, quote, is the health of the state. War has always been the occasion of a great and usually permanent acceleration and intensification of state power over society. War is the great excuse for mobilizing all the energies and resources of the nation in the name of patriotic rhetoric under the aegis and dictation of the state apparatus. It is in war that the state really comes into its own, swelling in power, in number, in pride, in absolute dominion over the economy and the society. Society becomes a herd seeking to kill its alleged enemies, rooting out and suppressing all dissent from the official war effort, happily betraying truth for the supposed public interest. Society becomes an armed camp with the values and the morals, as the libertarian Albert J. Nock once phrased it, of an, quote, army on the march. It is particularly ironic that war always enables the state to rally the energies of its citizens under the slogan of helping it to defend the country against some bestial outside menace. For the root myth that enables the state to wax fat off war is the canard that war is a defense by the state of its subjects. The facts, however, are precisely the reverse. For if war is the health of the state, it is also its greatest danger. A state can only, quote, die by defeat in war or by revolution. In war, therefore, the state frantically mobilizes its subjects to fight for it against another state, under the pretext that it is fighting to defend them. End of quote.
Beautiful.
So, let's talk about a strategy for liberty.
Yeah, I just want
to...
I remember one final thing. Rothbard, and this kind of does tie into the strategy, but Rothbard mentions how it is important to talk about foreign policy and war and not be apathetic to these topics as a libertarian. And as they also have a huge impact on the economy and on the war spending. And I totally agree with that, and I'm totally with the anti-war libertarians. What I think a lot when listening to people like Dave Smith is that they always talk about foreign policy as if it is kind of the be-all and end-all of our economic troubles. Like it's all this war spending is the reason why we can't afford houses and whatnot. And it is very expensive, and that is true, but it is not by far the biggest factor. And I just want to, I quickly pulled up the US government budget for this current year. And so expense on national defense is 13%. Health is 14%. Medicare, different category than health, is also 14%. Interest payments are 15%. And Social Security is 23%. So national defense at 13% is not really the reason why the economy is shit. It is a factor. It's not the biggest factor by far.
Yeah, good point. I think from in an existential sense, obviously talking about foreign policy, I think is super, super, super important. But yeah, from an economic standpoint, maybe it's less a central part of the discussion. It is still obviously, it's like if you were to kind of like half-ass the libertarian like viewpoint here and just talk about things that actually provide some kind of value, whilst those things could be probably better provided by private means, no one's benefiting from weapons being built, really. Whereas some people can benefit from these welfare systems.
I get the
obviously
point.
with
Fair enough.
huge caveats, but
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah. So, yeah, talking about the strategy for liberty, there's a couple interesting points, I think. I mean, firstly, like he talks about education, which, to be honest, this is kind of like the same shit you get with anything.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
we need to teach that in schools. But
I guess with
It does
libertarians, it's like we need to
take
teach
some-
it outside of schools.
yeah. It's kind of, to be honest, like this chapter was little bit bleak for me. Like, I think we've been reading this book for like 6 months, basically, at this point, I think, right? Over 6 months.
Yeah.
And back then, I think I was seeing a bit more optimism. Maybe I'm not. Maybe it's not that I'm optimistic. I've lost optimism, but I was kind of, whilst we were reading through earlier chapters in this book, he talks about like how people are doing, you know, how there are like pamphlets about libertarianism, how there are like these what's the word, like tax strikes and stuff, and which are obviously completely unworkable nowadays, and pointing to them as like evidence that there is some kind of nascent opportunity for libertarianism. I do think, at least in terms of foreign policy, I think libertarians are enjoying a lot of the spotlight right now. I think there's like a really big anti-war sentiment at the moment, which is really, really good to see. But it's not just founded on this idea of peace, which is the central part, but it's also backed up by this idea like, why the fuck am I implicated in this with my tax money? Why can't I do anything about this? Why are these people, and also why are these people of these foreign governments being conscripted and thrown into trucks to be sent to the front lines and shit?
Definitely.
In the case of like Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah, smartphones and the internet, and having that kind of video available is, I think, a big force for peace, because people can actually see what's going on at the front lines with their money, and you know, because of their taxes. And yeah, it's we don't have any Black Hawk Down with like Ukraine and like drones and shit just yet. We don't have that kind of propaganda. Like, we actually don't really have any of that same propaganda that we did like back in the early 2000s. You know, like, obviously it's not directly an American war what's happening in Ukraine and Russia, but like, there's really not the same kind of media infrastructure that there was, it seems. But yeah, I think there's a big conversation in this section about like gradualism versus, what's the word? Basically like extremist versus gradualist thinking in strategy. And I quite like how like Rothbard really, like, he actually treats Marx quite, like, he doesn't like pointlessly antagonize anything when he brings up Marx, but he's actually quite complimentary of their strategy, like, but in a way, like, we need to kind of like these are the reasons why things like Marxism succeeds, and that this is kind of lacking in libertarian circles. Yeah, he says it's basically,
but he talks about like,
good to have a utopian vision, right?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. I think he makes a really good point about the idea of like gradualist versus more like extreme, not accelerationist.
Yeah, basically, are you pure on principle,
or
are you like, for more gradual change that we can achieve right now? Yeah.
Yeah, and he basically just argues that like any time gradualism has made like a gradualist thinking person has made headways, they've always kind of ended up assimilating, and that in like many ways it's like, you know, you need to always be uncompromising on your political vision and seize as much as you can whenever you can. And you may need to make exceptions, but you need to kind of understand. You can't pat yourself on the back because you've taken an inch where you really want to take a mile, you know. And understanding like what the consequences of gradualism is and what like principally that means. Like he talks about abolition of slavery, which is like a great example. It's basically saying like, you know, would you advocate that like does it sound good to you as like to be a gradualist in the case of slavery, where you're like, oh guys, like I think actually like it's a bit hot politically right now, so let's like maybe push this idea for like over the next 10 years or so. Like we'll get there eventually, but like let's just take our time with it because we don't want to upset things too much. Versus like which like completely flies in the face of like the principle behind abolitionism in the first place, right? And abolition, like the whole point is to free human beings. So why wait 10 years to do it, you know?
Yeah, as soon as you have like a 10-year plan, you're basically saying it's preferable to have it abolished in 10 years rather than right now, right? Which undermines the claim of justice. And yeah, I think the quote that kind of got me the most in that chapter, where I thought like, yeah, is he says, if libertarians aren't willing to fight for liberty, who else will? And the answer is, of course, no one. Right?
Yeah.
So if
that fucking
libertarians gotta be like the most uncompromising, like, hardcore Rothbard,
most annoying
people. Yeah. Otherwise, what, the Reaganites are gonna help us out? No.
Yeah, they're it is literally like the last line. It is. I don't know, man. It really, yeah.
I will say one thing that was kind of maybe missing, maybe not missing. I'm sure he has positions on this in another piece of text somewhere, but what kind of is left unanswered from this book is how do we approach and treat government positions in real life right now? Like if you read this whole book, now you think like, so is it wrong for me to work in government and think I can make it better? Like, is it wrong for me to become a teacher or a policeman because now I consume taxes? And like, what does this make me a criminal? Or because the system is set up in a way that if like, yeah, sure, we can all boycott government and say like, no one's going to become a policeman until you free this system. But obviously that's not going to happen because they have the unlimited resource of bribing us with our own tax money. So they're just going to raise the wages for policemen until someone cracks, right? And
yeah,
it's like, is what is really, and I'm not sure I have like a super personally figured out opinion on this. I think I'm much more toward the criminal side of things. Like if you sustain yourself off taxes, then you're definitely a criminal. But I do see the point of like, this is the alternative has been outlawed, so what are we gonna do, kind of thing, right? So are we just not?
Yeah,
just not gonna have any of those then?
Exactly. Like, I mean, it's there are people that actually do those jobs because they want to make a difference, and you know, I mean, it's not necessarily that they want to make a difference towards any libertarian end, but they at least approach the job as a person would approach that same job if there was a private option for it, which is like in the case of teaching, it's to help people grow and learn. So if that's those are the only kind of realistic opportunities for you to do that within the place that you live, then, you know,
it's tricky. I think with teaching, it's a little bit more tricky actually, because you do have a lot of private options now. But like, I think a very clear-cut example is doctors and that kind of thing. Because like, you can't just open your own medical practice and be like, I'm completely gonna ignore the whole system of medical degrees from universities, and I'm not gonna take any government insurance, and I'm just gonna do my own pay over the counter thing.
My friend Barry is making the drugs.
Yeah, like you can go into like heal therapy, but now you're kind of in La La Land, and it's not, you can't really be a legit doctor privately. So, but at the same time, we do need those people desperately. So it's I think that's
For sure.
I think I'm most forgiving in that aspect. Like I wouldn't say anyone is like, I wouldn't blame a doctor for taking tax money, because what else is he gonna do?
I guess the most like egregious for me is like it's what you do, but it's also like how you think about what you do. Like the classic example is like the police officer that's like that knows that they can do what they want and doesn't feel any remorse about that. But also, I mean, like, fuck, man, like, even fucking university professors that are, like, so defensive about their careers, even though they are terrible teachers. And, stuff like that, like, when you have people who are, like, complaining about cuts to their funding or whatever, and it's like, I get it, but, like, you're being funded rather than being paid, like it's a shame that, I mean, with universities you can obviously go private and whatever, but like people complaining, and I'd speak to professors in university and they'd be like, oh, things have changed so much in the last 5-10 years, like university is like run like a business now. And it's like, what does that mean? Like
it isn't, is it though?
What, like the person going there to learn is like seeking a service from you and you have to provide it?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean? Like,
because you're still not making any money. You're still not benefiting.
Yeah. And I don't know, just that kind of shit frustrates me a bit. Yeah, I mean, I so the one of the first films that I worked on, documentary, was funded. I think we basically sent the Japanese government ended up paying. I don't know if I can say this actually. I mean, I'm not saying what the movie is, so I guess it doesn't matter.
So the government of Legoland,
basically, for the government of Legoland. There's basically a system in Legoland where you can apply for grants for if media that. There are some probably, I haven't like looked properly into it, but I think this happens with all movies. Like if you watch the end credits of all movies, it would be like subsidized by the like Vancouver state, subsidized by like some state in the US or whatever for filming in that country. All countries have like programs like this, where they basically like reimburse a huge amount of your expenses, and for us it was like 50% or something. So 50% of the expenses on a film is like insane. Like this insane money. So it's like if you're a producer and you're looking to, obviously you want to cut costs as much as you can. That's like the golden goose. And we literally spent like 2 months just doing the accounting on that, and it was financially viable enough to spend those human resources on that. But it just feels dirty. It just feels like, I'm sure like a lot of people in Legoland are happy that this movie is showing Legoland in a good light. But at the same time, it's very difficult to like square that with myself.
Yeah, and it's something that I think this book leaves us completely unanswered with.
For sure.
Sorry, I kind of cut you off there, but
no. I was just gonna say making movies is so fucking expensive, and there's such little guarantee of like a return that those kinds of things are always used. Like you won't find a movie that's not using that, I don't think.
And just companies in general, like if you can get like some government funding or less taxes or whatever, you'll take it, right? And it's like and it's more complicated than that, because you also have so many aspects where the government gets in the way of you doing your bidding, like you.
Exactly.
So it's like now here's like a little chance where I can get some of my stuff back, or I can get reimbursed for the opportunity that was taken from me. Like, why would you do that, right? It's not like, and everyone else is gonna be doing it. So if you don't, now you're in a like impossible market position. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, like freelancing, for example. Like if I don't declare my expenses, I won't get tax back on those. So. And I can not do that, and I can just not declare my expenses. But the less I declare in expenses, the more I pay in tax, because my income, that's income. That is the stuff that I spend, the money I spend on my job, that I don't declare, is just considered my personal income that I've spent on whatever. The government doesn't know what I've spent it on. So they see my income in the end of the year, and I will get double fucked because of that. It's not only that I'm not getting money, a tax rebate back, but it's that my income is artificially increased because I'm not declaring what that money was spent on, which makes my taxes higher the next year because they think I have more money. So you're like forced to do it basically. And
I think that's a much more
like the same, like
clear. For the libertarian, though, it's like
for sure, yeah, for sure, yeah. There's with like farming and stuff in the UK, for example, like especially after COVID, all these farmers have been gradually getting fucked over, but they've been getting fucked over because the subsidies have decreased. But it's just kind of funny that you're getting subsidies from the government. But then you also have to pay taxes on every single thing that you do. And you have to spend human resources and time and money on doing all of these fucking courses and all of these inspections and everything. So it's like, why is it this two-way street of money?
Yeah, why do we just
the government controls everything?
Yeah, why don't we just scrap all of this?
Yeah.
Okay. Any final thoughts on the book? How did you approach it half a year ago, and how would you look back on it now? Has it changed your position? I think we've talked about a lot of the contents already before reading it, and so I don't think it was as big as a like aha effect for you as it was for me.
Sure.
But
I was definitely more primed. Upon beginning reading this book, and definitely more open to the ideas than when we first started talking about it. I think what the book does really well is it doesn't really like teach you like you must think of it. It gives you kind of like a when you read it and you think about it and you talk about it and you like study it, I think you begin to kind of put in filters for your way of thinking about the world, which can help you to understand like the world around you and help you to deal with this like question of like private versus public. One of the things that we've talked about a lot today, we've brought up a lot today, and we've brought up a lot before, which is one of those filters, is like, if someone says to you, like, if the police were private, like, how could you guarantee that no one would commit crimes, for example? There's like one of the filters that we always use, I've noticed now, is like, well, we already have that today. Like, we already have like a society today where crime is like rampant in so many places. So like things like these kind of like checks that you have in your head, I think this book doesn't explicitly teach them, but like the more you do it, the more you read it, and the more you study it, the more you realize these are kind of checks to have in your mind. So I think it's like, I think this book is like a primer for helping you have these conversations with other people, helping you talk about these ideas with other people, and I think that's kind of where Rothbard kind of leaves it in part of the end chapter, is kind of like, you know, one powerful thing we have is like the people around us, and that's like these ideas are like so alien to people still. Like a lot of these ideas are so alien, but like, I mean, it was through you that I became more understanding and accepting of these ideas, and we, I think, can and have been having those ideas rub off on other people too. But I think the more that you study the like granular specifics of like what a private police force would look like, for example, the more you're able to deal with these theoretical questions that come your way. I do think that like one of the things this book doesn't do, and that's partly because of its age, but it's also not really the objective of the book, is like for example, I was talking about like healthcare with a friend the other day, and like it's impossible really to talk about. It's difficult to talk about why fully private healthcare would be better when people are like they're so familiar with this like argument about American healthcare and how American healthcare is shit because it's private, when really it's not. But the fact that it's private that it's shit. The fact that it's like incredibly strongly regulated that it's shit.
And as we've just seen reading the stats, that there are actually much higher expenses on public healthcare in the US than on defense.
Yeah. Exactly. So like, you know, obviously it's a book on theory, so it doesn't really delve into those specifics, but it at least kind of gives you the framework to talk about things.
Yeah, for sure.
In terms of how I've changed in the last 6 months, at least, honestly, I don't think I think being away from the book has moved me away from thinking about the ideas as deeply. But at the same time, like, my impression upon reading this book throughout, it's like had such a strong impression on me that it's not like I can't shake any of the things that I've learned from that book, and I haven't shaken any of those things that I've learned from the book. You know, it really does stick with you, I think, if you read it deeply and if you understand it, and if you're convinced by it, for sure.
And I think one very positive aspect is also that it's incredibly easy to understand, and like, you know, there are some more difficult parts, like chapter 9 with the inflation and business cycle stuff, that maybe if you read it once and you're not fully with it, you might not retain everything, but you will understand it in the moment at least. And like, it's a very different, you know, and you can easily like recite the tenets of the theory and, you know, what it's really about afterwards. Whereas if you read, like, if you give someone Karl Marx's Capital, you know, it's not clear that they would understand it while reading it, or even be able to like explain afterward like what it's really saying.
100%. Yeah. 100%. I wonder why. I have a question for you.
Go on.
What do you think about the state of libertarianism today? I think this is an important question.
Yeah.
Are you optimistic about libertarianism? How do you feel about it?
Well, Rothbard leaves us very optimistic, and I was kind of sad and a little bit pessimistic while reading it again, because especially in foreign policy, he talks about like how, you know, we had this Vietnam War and we really learned our lesson this time, and it's like all these execs,
which we did, and then we forgot it.
Yeah. So, and now all these wars, you know, again, and currently right now as well. So that I'm not super optimistic in that department. Also, what in regards of the US and the Libertarian Party, which is much more of a joke now than it was back then, I think. And
right, yeah.
I'm optimistic on the front of technology and just, you know, as we said before, also in war, you know, people have better access to information and really Yeah, all those things are factors pushing us toward more anti-war libertarianism rather than more statism, for sure. I'm really optimistic, and this Rothbard mentions this also in the terms of, we need a crisis to really wake up. I'm really optimistic and have been since Javier Milei was elected in Argentina, and I've been monitoring it a little bit here and there. I've done my Duolingo Spanish 850 something day streak. I'm still going strong since he was elected.
Oh my God.
Yep.
Wow.
I'm actually I still have my streak going from then. So, but
nice, good job.
It's been 2 years and a bit, I guess. But it's interesting. You always and Millet is not a perfect person, of course, especially in the aspect of defense. He has this very weird affinity for Israel and Judaism as well as a religion. I think he's also, I don't know if he is Jewish, but he has a lot of like rabbi friends, and so he compromises the cause in some way through his personality, as all human leaders do. But just on the economics of it, it's been quite amazing what he has been able to accomplish. I mean, the inflation completely stopped, and I think is now lower than even in the US. They're talking about like 1 point something percent inflation, I think, from the 200 or whatever it was. The central bank, of course, is ingrained in the constitution, as I understand it. So it's not like he can just do away with that. But poverty, and you never hear about this in any like articles about Millet, but absolute poverty has really diminished, like 30-40%, and even like just general poverty also huge decreases. So some like parasitic industries where were previously subsidized by government, you have a lot of people, of course, losing their jobs on those, but overall the economy is doing much better, and that means people are doing much better, and that's and I think one of my favorite example, I've brought this up a million times, but my favorite example is the whole rent control thing. How in Buenos Aires, how he completely abolished rent control, and the kind of legislation that came with that, and suddenly you see a complete surge in supply that completely overshoots demand, and you have rents dramatically decreasing because he abolished rent control. And it's like status brains go like, what? but so cool stuff anyway. So I'm optimistic in that sense. Maybe not in the US sense, but I think a lot of smaller countries here and there. I mean, Argentina is pretty big, but you know what I mean. I don't know if the US will keep being the center stage for libertarianism. I don't think it is right now.
Yeah, for sure. I do think, at least the strong, like I mentioned earlier, like this, the strength at the moment is like, one of the strengths we have at the moment is like social media, especially in regards to, I think we're in a very good position regarding like war, even though there are lots of terrible wars happening at the moment, and also wars that are being propped up by the states. Like, I feel like dissatisfaction with government in that realm specifically has like probably not been higher in my lifetime. And to think of like where we were after 9/11 and like how hawkish the whole of the states was back then compared to where we are now, there's like so much disillusionment, which is good. There's so much distrust, which is good. I think that the traditional media outlets as well are like really feeling it as well. Like the information becoming decentralized, I think that's inherently libertarian as well. We're not really like all that legacy media used to cry so much about this, like how age of like post-truth and shit, as if this was ever really a thing to begin with. And I feel like those voices are slowly dying down, and people are still like, actually, at least in the States, I could not say the same thing for Japan at all, but like, sorry, Legoland. But you know, it's like people actually are really engaged with politics, which is at least better than not. Like, it's at least better to have people engaged with politics than to have, like, you know, a uninterested body of people just allowing politicians to do what they want and not having any culture of criticism, culture of, like, you know, thinking deeply about things. I think that's good for sure. I think it's better than it's ever been, that, in my lifetime.
Yeah. With the anti-war sentiment, I think it's hard to I can't imagine what it must have been like during the 70s, you know, with the Vietnam War and all the hippie movement and stuff.
For sure.
But we're technologically and just culturally, I think we're in a good position right now. For sure. Okay. With that, we have finished our big 4-part series on Rothbard. For now, I think it will be quite.
You can hear me closing the book now.
I think
Closed.
It will be quite a while, probably a couple of years, but we will revisit, I'm sure, Rothbard writings at some point on this podcast.
Yeah, for sure. In the meantime, we have plenty of other libertarian scholars to look into, and some other completely unrelated things too.
For sure.
We're probably going to end up doing something a bit different for our next episode.
Yes, please.
But stay tuned.
Good.
Okay, thank you for listening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.